Hi there, welcome back to the Non-Serviam podcast. I am Lucy Steigerwald, and today in the internet studio we have first-time guest, as most guests are, Anthony Comegna. And welcome. I'm going to read your bio.
Thank you. Good to be here.
He is a historian, senior programs manager at the Institute for Humane Studies, and he is a specialist in 19th century American political and intellectual history and the history of radical liberalism, which all those things are good, I would say. Can we start off just if I accosted you and said, hey, what are your politics? What would you say?
Yeah, sure. I'd say I am a radical left libertarian and an anarchist. So
Okay.
left libertarian anarchism.
Well, you fit our demographic, to be sure.
Yeah.
Did you have any kind of political journey to get there? Did you start anywhere else?
So I suppose my first elements of political awareness, oddly enough, are being in the car with my dad in the mid-90s. The first presidential election I was aware of, I was in, I think, second grade for the 96 election, Clinton and Bob Dole, who you'll see that I have a signed portrait of Bob Dole up here from my friend Aaron Ross Powell.
Trying to figure that out, who that was. I can't tell, yeah.
But I remember listening to the radio, and my dad was a compulsive listener to Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, so mine too.
I grew up on Rush Limbaugh politics in the Clinton era.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So those next 4 years it's just like a blur of Clinton jokes, you know, from late night TV and from the radio. And so yeah, that was my first. I basically grew up a young Republican. My dad and my mom had both kind of dabbled in libertarianism when they were in college, back in the late 70s and early 80s. And my dad had read, you know, we had Ayn Rand around the house. Like that's actually the first libertarian book I ever encountered was a copy of Atlas Shrugged.
Man.
I was like 9 years old, and it was the only. My mom had this giant wicker basket full of books, and they were all like trash romance novels with Fabio on the cover. And then Atlas Shrugged was sitting there, this massive tome that looked completely out of place. And I went to her at 9, and I was like, "Can I read this? Is that all right if I read your book?" And she was like, "You should wait till high school." So I did. I basically grew up, you know, with, like I said, wishy-washy Republican politics. I was on board as a young high school student with the Bush administration, W. Bush, and the Iraq War. I was a big nationalist booster for the war effort. I remember watching Operation Iraqi Freedom on TV and wondering how long it was going to be until it was made the 51st state, and how great that would be. And then I grew up. Fortunately, I read Atlas Shrugged. I started, researching, especially, I read, the first week I was in college, I started reading the collection of essays, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. And that included some pieces about the gold standard. And I utilized the first time I had high-speed internet on my college campus to go down the internet rabbit hole of researching monetary policy, and quickly found my way into Mises, Rothbard, all the radical libertarian people. I spent then a few years in the Mises Institute circle and the Ron Paul campaign, and then in grad school I really took the left-wing turn. I was exposed to Marxism, Marxist theory, very much appreciated its connections to classical liberal theory, and emerged the way I am now, a wonderful anarchist butterfly.
Beautiful. Well, I'm tempted to completely sidetrack and ask you how Marxism is connected to liberal theory and. and
It's
tradition.
a deep, deep skepticism of power and the recognition that it's differential of power between people that causes conflict.
Okay,
Um,
that checks out.
yeah, like the classical liberal theory of class conflict is about politics. It's who has political control over other people's decisions. Whoever has the power to influence your decisions and uses it to do so is automatically setting themselves up as in conflict with you and your interests as an individual. If you broaden that and socialize it out into wider and wider scales, it causes wars,
It
world
does.
wars.
Yeah.
Marxists have a different approach to power in that they see it residing mainly in the hands of those who own property.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily see a reason to have many problems with that point of view. It's also accurate. So, and they developed their point of view from the classical liberal theory. So they go hand in hand to me. They're not antagonistic. Now, you might very well point out, well, Marxists don't seem to know anything about economics, and that's true. So we should learn history more from them, and they should learn economics more from us.
All right. I've
But
officially.
we generally speaking don't like talking to each other because we automatically just assume that we're enemies. We
Yeah, I
don't
think
need to
that's
do that.
true. I'm petty, so I've gotten turned off by Marxist presentation as sort of um, just immutable, historical, scientific. Like it
Hmm.
will go here and then here, and sort of it's an equation of ingredients, and then just yeah. Um, but
Yeah, I think that is accurate as far as problems with what's called structural Marxism,
mm,
the Marxism of Karl Marx, for example.
right,
But the field has expanded past that. Postmodernism has been a very big deal because it did call into question fundamentally the pretensions to science as a pure science that Karl Marx thought history had. Um, Human beings aren't chemicals. We don't,
right.
yeah. Um, we do actually choose things for ourselves. Um, so most Marxists today are not structuralist Marxists. They don't think history works through immutable laws,
Hmm.
um, and they don't, have that problem. They're actually a lot more amenable to talking with libertarians if we're all pleasant enough to each other.
Which we may or may not be. All right. I mean,
And they may or may not be as well.
I was basing that off a lot of casual sort of lingo on social media, and in a way that is not deep, but I remember. I swear, Deirdre McCloskey, the economist,
Hmm.
said something about how she said like Marx was the greatest social scientist of the 19th century, and he got everything wrong. Which I don't think I know enough about him to but I always thought that was an interesting thing from a free market economist to say.
Yeah, that's something I really appreciate about Deirdre's work. She's always so attentive to history
Mm,
and reads history just voraciously. Uh, Understands the importance of putting all these different conversations in context, long context.
well, I have a couple things to ask you, but since we're kind of moving towards history, anyway, well, I was listening to you on a couple of podcasts, and on one of them you were talking about what history is or isn't. And I would like to awkwardly read your own words to you, where you said, history has always been a series of dates that relate to the state, to powerful people, to people with money, dot, 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 people in the church, or whatever. Which I was, I guess, first question is like, what is history? Again, just,
Sure. I mean, in some sense, it's everything that has happened before the previous moment or
mm-hmm,
before the current moment, right? Um, that's not terribly helpful. Usually, we think of what counts as history in terms of documentation left behind, especially the written record. So history begins with the first written words and the first documents left behind that still currently exist. So if it's a disappeared document that once existed but no longer does in any form, it's not technically a piece of history. It's lost knowledge. So the problem is that most of the written records that we have before, say, the modern period especially, all come from, intensely powerful, wealthy people. Writing probably started as a way for governments to keep track of taxes, how much people, as an accounting method, essentially, to count how many bushels of wheat each peasant still owed for the year. It was a way to make people legible to governments.
Man, writing
Yeah,
betraying me. Writing, how could you?
Yeah, it's this from James C. Scott's Against the Grain and books like that. Writing in history, in a way, in itself, its very invention was to control people and to enhance the power of the state. And usually the state at that time was wrapped up with the church as well.
Right.
If the head of state was not also the head of church, then the institutions were bound together in some way or another, almost all the time. So yeah, it's history was made by powerful people in order to aggrandize their power further. But we don't necessarily think that's all of history anymore, precisely because we've started doing what's called history from below, which is recovering the narratives of people without traditionally conceived political power or religious power or economic power, right? The nameless, faceless person who was out there somewhere, but we will never know anything about them except the little bits that we can reconstruct. So maybe they didn't leave written records, for example, but we can use the records that we do have to build context around the existence of people that we know were out there. So, there are all sorts of examples of this kind of history by now. All you have to do is just Google best examples, history from below, and you'll find tons of them. But it takes, like diligent, creative historical thinking and methods. And it takes often, as a libertarian, I'm coming to these questions about like what's interesting in history as someone who is interested in individuals as the first and foremost unit of society, right? Like I want to know, I was actually first interested in psychology rather than history because I want to know why people make their decisions. And I'm not that interested often in, why politicians are doing things. I'm more interested in regular people and their impact on the world. Like I was thinking about this the other day, ways to explain anarchism to younger colleagues. And most of existence isn't about government. It's not about politics. We're not engaging in government in 99% of our day, and we don't need it for 99% of our day. It's not the most interesting stuff in the world. And frankly, everything good that we think of associated with the government has been fought and died for by countless unnamed people over, thousands of years. The right to vote has been something won from governments who resisted it doggedly for centuries. Like governments will do anything possible to keep from making life better for people, right? And anything good that they do now is because we've demanded it and died for it. And so, those people are the real heroes out there that we should be studying. We should be interested in the pirates and the prostitutes and the, crazy religious ranters in the streets during the English Revolution and stuff like that, who ended up making religious liberty foundational to the
Mhm.
rest of modern, political institutions. Like, the government didn't want to do that. They had to, because we
Yeah.
forced them to. Um, so yeah, that's the more interesting, compelling, and important stuff in history, to my mind. The things we find from below that very often the powerful don't want you sticking your nose into.
And there's this element of sort of it's less legitimate. I mean, if I was going to argue it, I would say that sort of, George Washington and a pioneer woman in 1862 are both exactly as historical figures like they're the same. They both existed and they did things. To me, therefore, they're both history. Um,
Yeah, and the question is, what do you care about?
mm,
What do you care the most about? What are you most interested in? And are you looking for impact, or are you looking for explanation? Right? Like, obviously, George Washington would be a more impactful person.
mhm,
Um, but it's also, what questions are you asking about that subject, right? So if your approach to writing a history of George Washington is assuming that um, being president is legitimate, for example, that's okay to sign up to be president of the United States, then you're already priming yourself to give him a pass, essentially, right?
yeah, that's true, isn't it?
As a libertarian anarchist, you're not willing to say it's okay that he, takes over leadership in this terrible political institution that is providing cover for slavery in most of the
Hmm.
country, and massacring Indians on the frontier, and I mean, what are they called? The Indians called Washington something like the town destroyer. You
Ooh.
know, so what questions are you going to ask about George Washington? What do you really care about? Are you more interested in lionizing him as a great first president, setting all these important examples, establishing the history of republicanism on this great continent, and setting up all the mythology to follow? Or are you more interested in asking how his actions impacted people with less power? My professor in college, Marcus Rediker, who some people might know as the pirate guy, he wrote all these books about pirates being revolutionary communists, and a bunch of other. He's just a tremendous historian. But in a all of his classes, he would tell undergrads, history is about who did what to whom. And so I
Okay.
say, like, I love the Marxist emphasis on power and violence, because power is violence. Anytime you exercise it, you're against somebody's will. It's violent inherently. So history is about who did what to whom has always stuck with me. So ask that question about Washington. Let that kind of line of inquiry guide your histories of George Washington, and you'll find an immediately different narrative
Yeah.
about who this guy is and what impact he had on the world.
I mean, I don't know how old I was when I learned about his whole moving his slaves back and forth so they were never automatically freed from
Hmm.
living in, I don't know if it was Philadelphia. I'm losing track of stuff. But like, yeah, I didn't learn that until, I don't know, like 5 years ago maybe. And I wasn't even subjected to public school and I still missed a lot of stuff. Um, I know you were more about college teaching, but I'm curious what you think. I mean, now there's a hideous backlash against exactly the kind of critical thinking about history that you just described. But I don't know, like, how you would approach history to someone younger than undergrad. Like, what does the average person need to know about history, and like, what should they reasonably be expected to know? Like, George Washington existed, presidents existed. I have a vague sense of dates. I mean, I love all that as well as I mean, I love everything about history, I think. But I always wonder, like, what people should know, I guess, like,
Hmm.
to be a functioning human in the world.
I'm on record a couple of times as having said, and I still basically hold to this. We can talk about it. I don't think we should teach history before college,
Whoa.
because I think it's too it's too difficult to grasp as a young person the abstract nature of what you're doing when you're either studying or producing history. It's not a science, it's an art. It's
Okay.
not the truth. Like any historian who I don't care what their methods are, it could be entirely statistical work, right? Entirely statistical research. They're not telling you the truth about what happened in the past. It's a small, very tiny snapshot of what you think happened in the past. And you assemble as much information as you can to make the most convincing argument. Another thing Marcus said to our grad seminars was history is a con game. You're not telling the truth. You're telling the most convincing version you can, given the evidence you have found and the questions you have asked.
Mm-hmm.
It tells a lot more about the historian than it does about the past. And that's really hard to grasp when you're younger than college age. I think when you're about college age, you start to understand better that all these books on my shelf here behind me are products written by particular people with particular points of view, and they could be wrong about all sorts of things, and you have to be very critical. That critical work from jump is very difficult for high schoolers and below, and I don't think that they're actually learning history, they're learning propaganda. And even when you said, like, should they know George Washington existed, or dates of things, that
Mm-hmm.
it sounds ridiculous to say, no, they don't need to know that. But that's because we have been so conditioned from the very beginning of all of our lives being told that it's important. So we believe it is. But we could have grown up in an entirely different world. Like I watch a lot of reaction streamers on YouTube from
Mm-hmm.
other countries. They wouldn't necessarily know who George Washington is, and they're making a living here on YouTube. Like, who cares? We could have grown up in a totally different, position where that was not an assumption baked into our brains, that these are the things you should know. And just think about that. If you go through a history textbook and you go chapter by chapter and you look at like the timelines, right? The list of dates, like you started the show here, the list of dates are all going to be, just mark how many of them have to do with the government doing something or other. How
Yeah.
many have to do with a politician? Like, we're told what is supposed to matter in history by the people who benefit from us believing it. So it's all propaganda, unless you're able to come to it understanding that it's not the truth, and that you can shuffle priorities around and you don't have to just accept what the book tells you is important.
I guess I would push back only in the sense that, like, the government and states and horrible wars are important because they not just they change things, but they hurt people, they kill people, like if they were weak and couldn't do anything, we wouldn't be so bothered by them. So,
No, for sure. I agree with that. But look, like you came to that conclusion because you're like a functioning, thoughtful adult, right? And I
hopefully.
don't necessarily think that kids are going to be critically engaging with thinking about these things like that. Uh,
But can
it's
they? And would it help for them to be? I just another thing that history to me under college age was, to me, it really helped cultivate empathy, I think. An actual understanding that the past contained people who were not stupider than we are today. They had certain, different ideas, different social situations, but they were just as people as we are. Um, and I started being a little kid watching the History Channel with my father back when it actually aired history, but it was basically World War II all the time. And I had grandparents old enough to have been aware and doing stuff during that time. So, like, to me, it's sort of a backwards game. They were there. and I can get a little farther back, and those people existed. And I don't think I can articulate very well why, to me, it matters to know that those people were real, but I think, to me, it does similar work to sort of breaking down the barriers of, like, well, they're in a different country, so I'm more important, and they're foreign, and they're, it's a kumbaya sort of bullshit thing. Like, we are in this together, I guess.
No, I look at. I might have come out with a pretty bold and daring suggestion to not teach history
Which I
below
appreciate.
college age, but that doesn't mean that I don't think it's part of being a well-rounded person and human being. I mean, I work for the Institute for Humane Studies and work in the humanities in particular. Like, I think it matters that you know history, but the question is teaching it in school, drilling it as necessary information. Like, it's not on par with literacy, numeracy, right?
Okay.
Or even I think actually the most important thing that history in terms of skills building teaches high school students is writing.
Yeah.
Even though apparently our high schools still aren't doing a very good job of it, but
Yeah.
no, I do think it's terribly important that people spend a lot more time than they do currently learning about the past, but do it on your own terms, according to your own interests, asking your own questions, right? Finding your own sources. So, like, yeah, I think having people around you as you grow up that, will engage you with information is great. Obviously, you should be reading, you should be watching documentaries, you should be, shown things like that. Schindler's List is really important, son. Let me tell you why. And sit down and watch the movie and understand. Like, tons of importance to all that stuff. The question is whether we are propagandizing about the past to kids, or whether we're teaching young adults how to be their own historians, essentially. And I think when you're in college, you can actually, your brain is developed enough to really be able to start doing it yourself and understanding what that means then when you read a book that someone else has done historical work on. So, and then if you just don't agree with me that we're propagandizing history in schools, then I guess that's a different set of questions. But yeah.
I mean, maybe if you, instead of doing rote memorization, you told kids, sorry, history, you got to wait until college. Like, and they'll be like, oh man, history. How intriguing.
We don't have philosophy classes before college, Why? Because
I guess
because philosophy
could try, but
yeah, I was reading philosophy though in high school because I learned about philosophers in my history classes and I was fascinated. So I was, I went to my teacher's bookshelf and started reading Voltaire and started reading Plato and Aristotle and histories of philosophy and whatever else. Like that, it got me into intellectual history as a high school student. But, I was an overachieving, nerdy high school student. So maybe I was already there. And not everybody is obviously going to be on the same timeline. It's part of what's wrong with our school system in the first place. But, if it's the point is to learn it without it being propaganda, and to learn it from an actual humanities based point of view. And you can't really do that in the setting of high school, and especially with like teaching for the test and all of that kind of stuff. College is a totally different environment to learn. I think learning history as a craft, as a discipline, is well suited to that environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, I was homeschooled non-religiously by history nerds. All I did mostly was read history books, and my math skills are terrible, which is a cliche that's true a lot of the time. But I feel like I don't actually understand what's going on in schools, and I like some of the right-wing nonsense of late is to suggest that the learning methods in K through 12 are similar to college because they're also anti-American, and and that's why you have the reaction of like the executive order on let's go yay America in K through 12. But my understanding of most K through 12 is that we were already doing that. That is where they tell you to pledge allegiance. That is where, like, that is what K through 12 sounds like.
Yeah.
College is different, and perhaps an occasional overcorrection briefly, but that's not, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like I agree with your take on that. Although I also don't know anything about what happens in our schools anymore. My son actually just graduated high school, so now I'm totally out of it, totally done.
That's pretty recent, though, at least. I guess I want to pick your brain slightly on the whole concept of college students as being illiberal, engaging in constant Maoist struggle sessions, and the greatest threat to freedom that anyone can imagine. I mean, I don't know if you like who or what is the problem in colleges, and if there's anything to that illiberal idea. You know,
I don't know. First of all, I don't work any. It's been a long time since I've worked with undergrads. Actually, yeah, since I was finishing grad school in 2015. So I work exclusively with graduate students these days, and have for a long time now. So I can't really speak to quote campus culture, but I will say these concerns, these worries that the right wing of our political life, and even with the Palestine protests, significant amounts of our mainstream political life it's so boring and uninteresting. What their concerns are.
Yes, it is.
It's so much ado about God, absolutely nothing. And I also find the people who are most concerned about it are generally like the least interesting to talk to, because they just complain about stuff all the time. And they probably don't have many friends in their departments or, their workplaces that will tolerate listening to them complain all the time. And so they save it all up for whoever is going to listen. And then it just pours out like a torrent, and it's just so boring, and it doesn't matter. None of it matters to anyone for any real like material reasons. Yeah, it's so overblown. This campus culture craze that is out there. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, and then okay. Example 19-year-old was annoying and overwrought and wrong about a few things. Therefore, what? What? Yeah. The world will crumble as soon as they graduate, if not before, because of them at 19 and their alleged wrongness. College students are usually right. They're not always on the right side of history, but my God, they pick the correct side quite a bit, I would say.
Like, people are concerned. Oh my God, Columbia students are up in arms about the Palestine issue or protecting immigrants on campus, and so they're occupying spaces or whatever. Who gives a damn? These kids are going to be like lawyers and accountants and good little capitalists in 2 years' time. They're going to go get jobs and work at corporate America.
Just most.
Yeah, like. What are you worried about, man? They're blowing off steam and getting their excitement out a little bit while they can, and then they're going to go join the corporate world and keep paying taxes. Like, who cares?
Though I suppose another reason to learn history is knowing, so you don't say things like, well, the civil rights movement was peaceful and they never took over college buildings or anything like that, and then you're not a moron. Or yes. Ideally, that today isn't any scarier than yesterday. It's a lot easier to support the protest that's done than the one today. All past protests are good. All current ones are bad. I think that is the official rule. All right, trying to segue from history to back to libertarian stuff. I was also watching your lecture on, I don't remember what you actually called it, like the 5 libertarian figures.
Yeah.
One of whom included Benjamin Lay, who I realized I knew about briefly from probably Wikipedia rabbit holes, but I forgot how delightful he sounded,
Oh
and
my
what a
God,
pain.
yes. Yeah, once again, Marcus's name is going to pop up.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Rediker wrote the book on Benjamin Lay.
You know, I told my library to get that book as
Oh,
soon as I
really?
finished listening. Yeah, I was like, why don't you
Yeah,
have it?
it's a fantastic book, and there's even a graphic novel.
Oh yeah, I saw something about that. That is intriguing. I should.
Yeah, the graphic novel is awesome. Looks great. Um, so yeah, Benjamin Lay's a fantastic guy. The subtitle of the book kind of says it all. The fearless, the fearless Benjamin Lay, the Quaker dwarf who led the first abolition movement, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so he was a Quaker. He was a little person. Um, he grew up in England in the late 1600s. He kind of did odd jobs and traveled a lot. He worked on a ship for a while. He, like I said, traveled around the world a whole bunch while working on ship. He eventually found his way to the Americas, first in the Caribbean, and then he and his wife, Sarah, who was also a little person, they settled in outside of Philadelphia. They lived in a cave. We could talk more about that aspect of it. But the great thing about Benjamin Lay, Marcus makes the argument throughout the book that he was probably politically, socially, the most radical person on the planet at the time. And
What a
he
legacy to
died,
have.
yeah, he died somewhere around, I want to say 1750, in that
Mm.
area. So he lived also at the height of slavery's horrors in the New World, both the slave trade and its practice, not only in the Caribbean, but as far north as Philadelphia, where even the Quaker Church not only financed and ran the slave trade, but also owned slaves themselves in Pennsylvania.
Which is
And
rather shocking if you know anything about Quakers, a couple of decades later, and they're always popping up in the most righteous of contexts, in the Underground Railroad, and like
mm-hmm.
they were usually on the right side of history. And Nixon doesn't really count. Like those people are really Quakers.
Yeah, well, another argument in the book is that the Quaker Church eventually became the first institution in the world to abolish slavery amongst its members because of Benjamin Lay, because he got the ball rolling and began what became the Quaker abolition movement. And they recognize that.
Yeah.
The whole history of the abolitionist movement recognizes Benjamin Lay's role in it. You can find it's in the cover of the book when you get one. There's this famous picture of all the roots of anti-slavery, and it's done like tributaries of a river, right? And each tributary has somebody's influential abolitionist name on it, and all the way back is Benjamin Lay. So he became the most radical person on the planet, in large part because he did so many jobs, so many different types of work. This is another interesting thing about Marxists. They're interested in people's jobs, what they do.
To a fault, I always thought,
Yes.
But I mean,
interested in their labor. Why? Because it's the thing you have to do in order to survive. And if you don't have access to property to sustain yourself, then you're at the mercy, at the whims of people with power over the goods that you need to survive. So you have to go hire yourself out to work for them. So Benjamin Lay hired himself out to do many jobs over the years. One thing that he did was he was a glover. And when you make gloves back in the day, they would all be leather. And so being a glover involved a lot of drying animal skins, burning the hair off of the skin, and then cutting it, shaping it, sewing it up into gloves. And it's a nasty, dirty, gross business. And that inspired him to become a vegetarian. He thought, every day, just tearing apart this animal flesh, he could see the damage done to a living being through this work. And he just absolutely hated it. And it inspired him to not want to exploit any creature. So he wouldn't ride a horse. He walked everywhere because he didn't want to exploit the horse. Like I said, he was vegetarian, but he was also essentially vegan before the term had been coined. And veganism was something that had caught the interest of a lot of like radical English and other Europeans in the 1600s because they had just sort of started reading Hindu texts.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
And they got the ideas, also certain, Greeks like Pythagoras famously has a very bizarre lifestyle and vegan diet. So Benjamin Lay also read a ton. He would have read these ancient traditions and read about how to keep a vegan diet. He essentially did entirely without animal products, except he did keep an apiary, so he could have honey, and he would occasionally drink milk, cow's milk.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it. Otherwise, he was entirely vegan. He would spin his own clothes from flax so that he would not have to purchase slave-made fabrics. He would not use any materials made by slaves in any step of the production process. So no sugar, because as the Cuban aphorism goes,
That's right,
sugar is made with blood. And he, perhaps most importantly, as far as the abolitionist movement, he would attend Quaker meetings and perform this elaborate street theater-like sets of performances, performance art, to shame the Quakers away from slavery. The Quakers that were involved in either the slave trade or owned slaves themselves, they were called weighty friends. Weight as in like they're heavy influence over the Quaker community and its politics. And so making the Quaker Church turn to abolitionism was a matter of shaming the weighty friends before the rest of the congregation and gradually shaming them out of their complicity with slavery. So Benjamin Lay would do things like he would stand in front of the meeting house in the snow with no shoes or just his bedclothes on, let's say, or no pants and no shoes. And a little person, he's seems particularly vulnerable to conditions like that. So everybody who passed by would be like, Benjamin, come on, get inside, like warm yourself up. You're gonna get frostbite out here. And of course, he would put on his smarmiest voice, I'm sure, and say, look at you, pretending to care about me. And you've got slaves back at the farm, freezing in terrible conditions, no better than your livestock is kept. So you pretend to care so much about me, and you don't care about these human beings that you keep as property and treat like, far less than you would treat even the lowest among us here. And there's this one situation where so reminder, Quakers are pacifists. It's a matter of faith. They're pacifists. So it's unusual that Benjamin Lay would attend a meeting with a sword on his hip. But he did one night. He had a sword on his hip, and he had a Bible, and he had prepared it ahead of time by cutting out the pages, and he filled it with a bladder that was full of very red, dark pokeberry juice. And he took that book into the meeting, and when it was his time to speak, because everybody has a chance to address the meeting,
right.
When it was his time to speak, he was moved to get up and give another railing tirade against the weighty friends and their slaveholding, and he ranted to them about how slavery was the devil, it was evil, and by either transporting slaves, profiting from the slave trade, or producing any crops with slaves, having anything to do with anyone who has slaves or supports slave trade, it's all complicity with Satan. And he said, there's blood on all of your hands unless you immediately denounce it now. And he stood up, he pulled his sword, he took the Bible and stabbed it through the middle, and blood started pouring out of it. And he ran around the meeting, sprinkling the weighty friends with the blood of slaves. And 50 years later, they had come along. It was the first institution in the world to forbid its members to hold slaves.
That my like, I love that, but some equivalent now, even I might think, well, that's how you alienate people and make them all mulish and they don't want to. But I think that's just a version of many roads to Rome, and being hilariously confrontational surely is just one of them.
Yeah. He was a good friend of Benjamin Franklin, by the way. Franklin would go visit him in his cave outside of Philadelphia. And Franklin recognized how important he was, just because he was. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple quotes about how historians have treated Benjamin Lay. David Bryan Davis is one of the leading historians of slavery and anti-slavery in the last several generations. He called Benjamin Lay a demented little hunchback.
That's not very nice.
And his take on him was exactly kind of what you said, that this guy is annoying. He's like a gadfly. He didn't really, he's saying all this crazy stuff, living in a cave. He didn't really have an impact on the world.
He's right, though. I mean, even if you think he's exhausting and you think his methods seem foolish, he was correct, though, surely. I mean,
well, but to write him off as a demented little hunchback tells you a bit about the priorities or the prior point of view of the historian.
Yeah.
He's essentially writing off Benjamin Lay as relatively insignificant compared to the powerful institutions that he's more interested in. Gary Nash, another prominent historian, on the other hand, called Benjamin a living stick of dynamite in terms of reverence, right?
Yeah.
A living stick of dynamite.
I like that.
Like you could look at him as a demented little hunchback who was annoying, and that was his main influence on the world. Or you can look at him as someone who enlightened people by being explosive in the way that he was. And I like, hey, I'm not saying you would have to enjoy going to dinner with the guy. I read his book.
I would go.
Benjamin Lay did write one book. It's pretty weird. It's pretty strange. He was very much into the older theology that I'm an atheist along with my left libertarianism. So I do not cannot follow you in that kind of thinking. But he was an enlightener. He helped brighten the world. He wasn't a demented little hunchback.
I wonder if he was a well-known figure in some. I don't want to compare him yet again to George Washington, but what would sort of more people knowing about him and people of his ilk, would that do some good in the world now, I wonder? Or is that just sort of too mathematical again?
No, I think it is tremendously valuable. I kind of think the main value to be derived from studying history in general, but history from below in particular, studying history from a classical liberal or a Marxist lens about power relations, what it is most valuable for, first, like you said, developing empathy,
Mm-hmm.
But also, along with that, is the understanding that the world does not have to be the way that it is. It was made this way by particular people over thousands of years making very particular decisions for particular reasons. And we can make different decisions for different reasons. We don't have to just accept the world that we have inherited at birth as though it always has had to be the way that it has been, or that it always has to be the way that it is. It the important thing about a lesson from someone like Benjamin Lay is that you can always choose to be different
Mm-hmm.
than the world is or expects you to be, in the same way that Benjamin Lay was. You can choose to be an anarchist, even if you think it's never going to happen, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, one historian said, like, for all of human history, nobody thought the abolition of slavery was possible until it was.
Mm-hmm.
It just flipped. As soon as the Haitian Revolution happened and the world like turned completely inside out, all of a sudden it was possible. And, you know, the floodgates open from there. And you know, now the greatest perpetrators of slavery in the world are probably the American prison system. And a couple militaries out there.
Yeah.
But you know, you can choose to be like Benjamin Lay. You can choose to be like a William Leggett, another, you know, hero of mine from history. We can choose to make the world different than we're told it has to be. And so learning about people who made that choice in bold, dramatic, important ways, and that, like I was saying before, you know, we think of these as good things now. Well, they're good things because people fought and died for them. People sacrifice their reputations, knowing that, you know, perhaps one day a historian's going to call me a demented little hunchback, right? I don't give a damn.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this because it's right. That's important. That's hugely important. But you don't come across that again you would never find his name in a textbook ever, unless you see maybe that photo or that picture I was talking about where his name is one teeny little tributary all the way at the back at the beginning of the movement, right? Like, you'd never hear him mentioned because people have already decided he's not important. The state abolished slavery.
Yeah.
Get the hell out of here.
I hate that I once again forget the name of the fellow in Britain who worked decades
Clarkson?
to abolish the slave trade and slavery in Britain. And I think it was Lawrence Reed who I saw give a lecture about him once, sort of. And that is a name that should be well known. And not to imply like very particular machinations sort of from above, but there are certain people that it does not behoove the state or even the K through 12 schooling system to tell you about. Mm-hmm. There are perhaps too many of them. Like, I assume, well, I mean, I've heard weird things about how my friends learned in public school. Like, they learned every battle of the Civil War, and then they ran out of time by like 1940. It's like really bizarre priorities. But say maybe you'd learn about Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King, though who knows now. And maybe that's all. And you can say in a very narrow way why, oh, they broke the rules, and that was good. And we all would have supported them at the time, and now they're safely over here. And there's no lesson to be learned beyond the bad thing was overcome by, you know. There are reasons not to learn about these people, and they are, yeah, they are power friendly, I guess.
Yeah. And the funny thing about like high school textbooks or, you know, grade school history books or whatever is that, yeah, you know, it'll tell you things like you said, the civil rights movement, all this activism and activity and stuff going on, and you know, we need to make changes. But then the chapter ends with the state making changes, passing the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and you know, washing its hands, and now everything is all good. The state has done its job and improved.
But
So
don't go
aren't
all
you
Black
grateful?
Panthers. Don't go too far.
Yeah, aren't you grateful for the government that passed the Civil Rights Act and the president who signed it? And there, that wonderful legacy of the U.S. government, and that's how it ends. It ends up being a story about government,
Yeah.
not about human beings.
Yeah.
It's not the cast of the story is that it's always going to end up here with the government being right and good and better. But the thrust of the story is that they resisted that change the entire time, and people literally again had to die for it. But that's not how the story's told, really.
Even ostensibly kind of neutral textbooks will do that. And to be really weird and cite, well, I think John Stossel, he had a whole thing about how the government is like someone who runs in front of a parade and pretends to be leading it. Like they're taking the credit for the movement that's already happening, and I'm the leader. I did this, and I think there's certainly something to that.
Yeah, Lincoln gets to be remembered as the great emancipator,
right?
Even though he had no interest in ending slavery, really. He did. Yeah, he was pushed into it, and the history of what is wrapped up as his accomplishment includes, centuries of slaves. The first slave rebels were the slaves. So
I think there is also
very annoying.
an implied sort of message that, well, they couldn't have known any better. And to me, say the founding fathers, I wouldn't be as annoyed by them if they, the ones who wrote weren't clearly intelligent and had some, shall we say, good leanings, good inklings, poetic feelings about human freedom. Mm-hmm. And if those people, most of them, couldn't actually sacrifice anything to not have slaves, then my God, like what's, like it's like the ones who know better, not knowing, like not acting better, is very frustrating. And I don't think even your slightly well-meaning conservative, if they exist anymore, really understands that picking on America and the founders in that fashion, or even say Israel, anyone who professes to have higher ideals, you're gonna get,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't give that argument any time of day that they're products of their time. That's all complete bullshit, I think. And it's a way of simply avoiding the really difficult moral quandary that you're in if you're somebody who's going to defend a George Washington or a Thomas Jefferson or an Andrew Jackson or any slaveholding president or politician, like in the U.S. in particular, or any other country that like the French, the British, they all had pretensions to be governments that respected liberty, and they're riddled with slavery. Like, no, how I know that they knew slavery was wrong and that the slaves didn't want to be there? Because they knew that about the Jews in ancient Egypt, right? Like no slave has ever wanted to be in slavery, and everyone knows that inherently. That there is no excusing away that fact because they were born in a different time when it was legally acceptable. That never made it ethical or everybody understood this. Like even the people who tried to propagandize to Northerners that Southerners are really kind to their slaves and take care of them. We're all one big family on the plantation. You just don't understand our culture and all this stuff. They knew they were lying. They knew it. So and you can tell that they knew it because they say the exact opposite thing in other places. Mm-hmm. And they talk to each other in their own newspapers and letters about the strategy, the rhetorical strategy. And it's all about profit and protecting profit and any moral defense, any philosopher, back to goddamn John Locke, who I can't stand. John Locke's defense of slavery ultimately boils down to, look, what are we going to do? We need to make money off of these people somehow. And he
I
came
didn't
up with,
realize he defended slavery. I actually didn't know that.
he essentially made up a totally ahistorical argument about how slaves are essentially captives of war, and you can
Okay.
either execute them or keep them in bondage.
That's convenient, I guess,
So
for
it's,
him.
yeah, and that's not how Europeans got their slaves.
It is not.
Other Africans were going to war with other Africans to catch those slaves for sure. So they were prisoners of war by the coastal Africans, and then they were sold as, laborers to the Europeans. They weren't the Europeans didn't have jurisdiction over these people till they bought them.
Yeah.
So it's totally made up. And, like I said, every society that has ever been subject to slavery has the knowledge inherently that you don't want to be a slave. It's just nonsense. It's nonsense.
I mean, there are certain information being easier. Like, I know someone who swears he didn't really understand that war was a terrible idea until he got to Iraq with the Marines. And that sounds ridiculous, and perhaps it is, perhaps it's not an excuse. But he grew up on army bases throughout Asia and stuff, and like, I don't want to give people a pass, but I also but the capacity for knowing better is always there, and it's not as hard to find as people pretend. The capacity to be truly fooled in some ridiculous way, I guess, is also there to me.
I wouldn't argue for holding people responsible for being perfect,
Mhm.
right? But you have to correct your mistakes. Once you wake up to them, you have a responsibility to correct them and rebuke your older self for having made those mistakes, like me in the Iraq War.
Mhm.
I'm only, or I should say, I'm eternally grateful to the God I don't believe in that I was not eligible to vote for George W. Bush in 2004.
Mhm.
I'm going to be happy for that till I die, because I would have, and I would have really profound, psychologically damaging regret if I had been able to do that.
I do know multiple people who were very weirdly kind of neocon right around the similar area in high school and became anarchists and other things. Like there's a I've seen this progression before, so
Yeah, yeah. And but again, it comes back to my point. Like, why is knowing about somebody like Benjamin Lay important? Because you can, by learning about him, by learning about the example that he set and his ability to learn new things, to take new lessons from his experiences, to change his moral point of view and then put it into such rigid practice.
mhm.
That is an inspiring example for how we can choose to live. And maybe the problem with most people is that they're not choosing to live like that. They are just kind of along for the ride and not making many actual deliberate choices about their ethics
I think that's very
or
true.
their politics.
And you said
Uh,
rigid, which is basically always a bad thing when described. And you say rigid, and it is a good thing. It is baffling that spinning your own thread and then the cloth and all that. Like that is rigid. Perhaps rigid is good on occasion. That's interesting.
but he was a reader as well. He would
Mm-hmm.
constantly read. He had that was the material wealth that he actually really cared about were his books. So he was always learning and like I said, adopting new points of view and like you can rigidly apply your personal ethics and politics and still learn and change.
I I found I think when I learned okay, briefly I must tell you about my favorite pope, who again offhand I don't remember, but a 14th century fella who not only did he say it was bad to kill the Jews to stop the Black Plague, he basically wrote in unofficial Pope stationery, "This is the work of the devil if you kill the Jews to stop this plague thing." Like, it's like, and the idea that a 14th century guy who was told he was basically talking for God actually figured that out. I mean, the lowest peasant can figure out X moral, but then someone in that position can figure it out. That almost, to me, is like even more evidence that there's not much of an excuse. I mean, sure, he should have quit being the Pope, and like that one guy did, and, but still, anybody could know better at any time, no matter how much of a lack of information spreading and the world being giant. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And there, we do not. It's the height of hubris and present bias to think that we have some kind of magical formula for the right and the good.
Mm-hmm.
And people in the past were just somehow ignorant of basic ethics. Mm-hmm. And interpersonal, relationships. Like, that's complete nonsense. Whoever was the first person bonked on the head and forced into servitude to another caveman, that was the first slave rebel.
Yeah.
The first slave was the first slave rebel.
Yeah.
Like, it's nonsense. We and frankly, we only think this way because, again, powerful people have told us to. Mm-hmm. Powerful people have told us, give us a pass. Not only those slaveholding politicians of yesteryear saying, give us a pass, don't judge us too harshly. We didn't know any better. And then today we're propagandized to, don't treat them too harshly, because then you might treat us too harshly for the stuff that we get up to, and we don't want to. We're sorry about the Iraq War. We're sorry.
We learned nothing, but we're sorry because it's safely in the past.
And you can't, we what are you going to do? We didn't know. It's all, yeah.
I mean, not to brag, because I don't do much in life to free the people, but I knew when I was a teen during the Iraq War. You didn't know, but you've gone on to, I don't know.
Libertarianism woke me up.
Well, so. I've been pretty peeved at libertarianism, perhaps the kind in scare quotes of late.
Yeah.
But there is always, you are that element that's still there, thankfully. It's making me feel good about it. But as sort of a segue, again, also, I can't believe I didn't know that Frederick Douglass spoke at the Seneca Falls Convention.
Oh, yeah.
Until kind of not that, like the past 5 or so years. Mm. And I did feel like someone should have told me. Like, I felt very indignant. I don't know who, but someone should have.
I agree.
And on that note, so you had your lecture about libertarians of note, and I know someone, names are going out of my head today, someone at Reason, this whole thing about Frederick Douglass being, a libertarian and what have you. Libertarians, because we think there aren't that many of us, we do like to claim certain figures in the past. And I have seen sort of liberals roll their eyes at this when they're aware of it. And I don't know if we can claim them, like what is libertarianism if sort of anyone who has the vibes counts? Sure, I don't know. Yeah. How loose and how binding is it, and should it be, kind of like?
Well, if you want to get the most tightly bound version, you would want to follow the actual usage of the word. Mm-hmm. The actual usage of the word, as far as I can tell, goes back to the 1790s in Great Britain, and discussions in their newspapers about the issues of the day, which included the Napoleonic Wars, mm-hmm. or I'm sorry, for the Revolutionary Wars with France, and then later Napoleonic. But there were lots of debates about free speech and free press at the mm-hmm. time, because not everybody was keen on protecting monarchies. And
Yeah.
so they were doing a lot of censorship and debates about censorship. And those who were on the anti-censorship side sometimes were referred to as libertarians or libertarian in their political leanings about these subjects. So they were the ones arguing for liberties to be respected during wartime. But it didn't really refer to a specific faction or tradition in anything. It was just an adjective to describe what somebody's general position on freedom was.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first, I believe, was also used by Proudhon a little bit, again, to kind of just describe a general preference for liberty when dealing with other people. And in the United States, it was first used in the, I want to say, 1870s by Benjamin Tucker to describe his own version of anarchist politics, which for probably about half of the history of the word libertarian was, you could say, like, Tucker's libertarianism was very left-wing. It was very much a left libertarian philosophy. And then in the course of the 20th century, fusionism reversed that, and libertarianism has become associated with, like, low tax Republicans, and that's pretty much it. So,
and that's on a good day.
Yeah, etymologically speaking, it refers to originally Benjamin Tucker's politics. Mm-hmm. He's describing himself as a libertarian. Now, my dissertation was essentially on the prehistory of libertarians in the U.S., the Loco-Focos party, or the Equal Rights Party. And my argument for why they are the precursors is because they had the full package of what eventually became Tucker's politics. So if you consider, like, the definition of libertarian is Benjamin Tucker's politics, well, then where did Benjamin Tucker's politics come from?
Sure.
You go back a few decades and you can, do the prehistory there. So my argument is that Loco-Focosism is the word that would describe libertarian before Tucker was using the word libertarian. The reason he couldn't describe himself as a Loco-Foco is because there were no Loco-Focos by the 1870s. So he had to find a new word. In the same way that I think you can argue today, the libertarian movement is dead, or at least it should be. Yeah. Perhaps you think it should be. I don't think it has any political salience or meaning anymore, really. So maybe we need a new word to go back to Benjamin Tucker's politics. Sometimes that happens, Mm-hmm. Political movements fold up and the package of ideas stay behind, and you just need to describe yourself as something else now because the organization lost track of the things. But
yeah, I've been using that word for decades at this point, and I haven't been able to get rid of it, even if I use anarchist and other words. But let's say the last thing they did was get Ross Ulbricht freed from prison, and that was nice of them. And then they can stop everything else because they're a disaster, perhaps. Are you the only person who was tear gassed in 2020 at a police protest while wearing an Albert J. Nock shirt?
From what I understand, yes. If there was somebody else there with that shirt on, yeah. I'm not aware of it. They also broke my glasses.
Yeah, that was
ripped my shirt and broke my glasses.
You probably were the only person in a shirt of that type. There is a strain of, I mean, we could just throw out libertarianism and be done with the talk, I guess, but like someone, like you work at IHS, libertarianism.org, you've been affiliated with certain sort of the respectable libertarianism, but like we really seem to hate protesting. Like the first great outcry against ICE under the first Trump, I knew some youngish people from like Students for Liberty who were protesting, which was awesome. But there was this immediate, like, I don't want to because there's going to be a leftist there too. And it was like a tailored, focused protest against an aspect of the federal government. And
Yeah.
yet these people, any excuse to be like, well, I don't want to do that, as if every protest ever doesn't have weird hangers on and other. It was so focused and so clear. And actually
Yeah.
now it's similarly, especially in California, like there is no moral framework that says that's worth anything that would be against the ICE protests right now,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I'm concerned. But you got to be respectable in some way. You got to button up and stuff.
I think, oftentimes that point of view or that argument, that let's call it an excuse to not go to protests or whatever, get engaged in some active way. I think often that might betray the person's actual values, that maybe they really don't care so much as they might say. My wife is Black, and she was not like, didn't know libertarians before she met me, but she'd heard the word quite a bit. And of course, so we met in 2013. And we've been through quite a lot of current events that involve race and protests. We've been through an awful lot of events together and had many, many conversations now about politics. And something that has always stuck with me since we first met, that she said, and I think she probably would still say, is that more often than not, libertarianism is a convenient excuse to do nothing.
Yeah.
And libertarians are cowardly. And I think that is something that, again, is a hard truth to face up to in yourself, to look at, like, what do I choose to go back to Benjamin Lay? What made him so special? He put his own body on the line. He put himself out there to protect the slave, to intercede, to argue on their behalf. He risked himself repeatedly. And he was in a special, a especially vulnerable place given his dwarfism. And we've got to face up to that. Like, do you actually care about changing things in the way that you say? And how do you prioritize them? And is some, little complaint about, like, well, I don't like all the company that's going to be there because it's going to be annoying lefties and college kids and whatever. Like, get over it if you really care about that, and think that you have the ability to, like, prioritize your time that way. Maybe you don't, and that's okay. We do what we can, I guess, in some cases, but I'm not, like, expecting that somebody is supposed to go to every single protest. I have not, for example, been to an ICE protest here in Baltimore yet. They've been having them now and then in certain parts of the city, but I just have not gone to one. I don't know, maybe somebody would criticize me for that. That's fine.
These are people, though, who couldn't even rhetorically.
Yes.
They couldn't stomach rhetorically supporting it. That's how exactly kind of pathetic they were.
Even just committing to the idea of it happening seems to be a problem. Then maybe you really don't care about this very much. If you're more concerned about who is going to be involved around you at the protest, then it's not really about the issue, is it? It's not really about who is doing what to whom here, which is our government harming immigrants. I do have a problem with that. I feel like I left some part of that question on the table.
Well, I guess Albert J. Nock was there, who I haven't read, but I do know that his book had the beautiful title of Our Enemy the State. Am I?
Yeah, that's what was on my T-shirt too.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. So,
but okay. So I maybe the point I feel like I left on the table was that if you hear something like what my wife said and it really stings you, then maybe it's actually accurate for you.
It does sting me to a point because it is accurate in a way that I don't feel great about. and I could
Well,
find. I mean,
with respect, like I don't know you personally. This is our first time meeting and talking. You don't seem like someone who needs to feel stung by it, because what I really mean is maybe it's an accurate reflection of who you really are and how you use libertarianism in your life. Maybe
mm-hmm,
you think it's like a lot. I hate the debate culture in libertarianism.
mm-hmm,
It's very like debate bro culture too, because it's so
yes,
male heavy
yes,
anyways. Because it's almost like people who do the debate thing value libertarianism as a solid set of arguments that they
mm-hmm,
can win any debate with. It's not that they have firm moral commitments to the point of view. It's that they like winning arguments, and
mm-hmm,
that's why they stick so much to the economic stuff. I feel, because that's easy arguments to win. It's just straightforward, win the argument, be done with the debate, you won. You get to trash someone online for a while and win an argument and go feeling good about yourself, and then never actually do anything,
yeah,
right? And that's the difference. Like, are you actually morally committed to the cause, or do you use libertarianism as an excuse to not go do anything or to not care about anything? Because I just leave things alone, hands off. That I just, I don't ever have to help anybody. I don't ever have to try to produce positive change. I don't have to input anything into the system. I just need to leave my hands off. Well, if that is how you operate in the world, maybe it should sting a little bit. I don't
yeah,
know, but generally speaking, the people that I've found most enjoyable in libertarian circles aren't like that. And they
mm-hmm,
don't really need to be to feel like it's a criticism of them. It's more a criticism of our misbehaving peers who are misusing our word,
yeah.
libertarian. If it's not really who they are and what they think and how they act, they should take their hands off of our damn word.
It is like the Office Space thing. Like, why should we have to change our name? They're the ones who
When they're the ones
suck.
that suck,
Yep.
yeah.
I am reminded of I used to work on Anaware.com, and I used to talk to Eric Garris, who was one of the founders of it, and was a libertarian elder statesman who had stories about hanging out with Murray Rothbard and stuff. But he also had stories about living in San Francisco, allying with like the Students for a Democratic Society, working like a lot, Vietnam and afterwards with those people, rioting after Dan White got a slap on the wrist for killing Harvey Milk and the mayor of San Francisco. Like, he's like, I don't want to say like the perfect example, but like it's interesting that period of time, libertarianism, such as it was, they were clearly working more so with the left. And at some point, I don't know if it was the damn 80s, they just seem to have given that up like entirely almost.
Yeah, well, I very strongly recommend this recent book here to put context behind that observation, which is Quinn Slobodian, intellectual historian Quinn Slobodian.
It's an interesting
His book
name.
is called Hayek's Bastards. Race,
Oh, I might
Hayek's
have heard of
Bastards,
that. Yeah.
Race, Gold, IQ, and the Capitalism of the Far Right. And it's loaded up with names you will recognize, people you have met and spoken
Mm-hmm.
with, who have been part of that exact process of disentangling libertarians with the left and wrapping them up very tightly with the right wing. A lot of so-called libertarians out there will hate this book, and they will feel personally attacked that Quinn Slobodian is calling them a racist and a gold bug and a whatever in this book.
But it's fair. I mean, it is like
it,
I
it
feed
is a
that to me.
straightforward. It is a history of the movement and
Mm-hmm.
how it has become so wrapped up in the right wing. How the hell do you get someone like a Hans Hoppe,
Yeah.
calling himself a libertarian, speaking at all sorts of libertarian events, idolized by so many young libertarians? Hans Hoppe, Oh my God. Like,
And he got
spend a little
memes.
bit of time reading about how racist that man is and how you know, the creepy weirdness of so many of his ideas. Yeah, it's important. This is a really important book in understanding how we got here to the
Mhm.
point where you and I are sitting here talking about, like, we need a new word and they took our word from us. This is
Yeah.
how. This is
Yeah.
how.
All right, I better read that thing then. Um, he might have been a minarchist whose mom brought him lunch and did his laundry, but I do have a soft spot for Thoreau, and I always think of sort of the two roads, both of which he demonstrates in Civil Disobedience, which is go to jail to protest, the Mexican-American War and not paying your war taxes, and then his friend bailed him out after like a day. And then he has this description of going berry picking with like boys from the village. And he has this line that I always remember, which is the state was nowhere to be seen, I think, or found. And so I guess I wonder what you think about different avenues. Like you mentioned stuff that to me sounds like sort of living anarchist, living libertarian, but then also putting your body fully on the line. And those are a bit in conflict. I guess I'm okay with people who can and are willing to play somewhat respectable while still not saying, well, let's cut the jackbooted thug budget by 0.2% and then compromise at 0.75. Like, not those people, but people who can maybe inch things in the right direction. Like, there are different roads to do this, I guess, but I don't know. Like, should we all be Benjamin Lay, all of us? Would that even work? It's not going to happen, I think, but
I don't think many of us have the capacity
mhm.
to be like a Benjamin Lay, honestly. I know in my mind, in my heart, that I shouldn't be eating animals, but I
Mhm.
do. I keep doing it. I don't really know why. I don't know what's wrong with me in some sense in that way, right? Why can't I bring my behavior into alignment with what I say my ideas are? Maybe I don't actually believe it. Maybe I really don't actually feel it in my mind, in my heart. I don't know. But I do think a better person would figure it out, and maybe I will at some point. But I don't know right now. So I'm not a Benjamin Lay. I couldn't be him.
Mhm.
Uh, but just like my thing with not teaching history to kids
Yeah.
earlier, maybe this is an unpopular take or would need a lot of like hashing out with people. But I I don't support political engagement or movements or
Okay.
trying to accomplish political change because it all washes out statist in the end. And I feel like if those early libertarians, if those Loco-Focos and the abolitionists and all the people who basically had Benjamin Tucker's politics before Tucker was using the word libertarian, if they had focused on changing people's attitudes, they would have stuck around, and
Yeah.
we would the word would still exist. We would still talk about Loco-Focos just like we still talk about the transcendentalists.
Hmm.
Because
Well, some of us do, but
a
yeah.
lot of these people in the Loco-Foco movement, they had a dramatic impact on the arts and on culture.
Mm.
We're talking like poets and painters and novelists, um, short story essayists, people who were writing, literary criticism in magazines and stuff. Like, it's called the Young America movement. If people are a little more familiar with Jacksonian era in particular, it's a massive shift in America's culture and
Mm.
the idea that we could compete culturally with Europe and really we had something special in our sauce here. We've got the world's republic.
Yeah.
Like we're forging a new destiny for mankind here. Let's produce some art about this and let's freak people out a little bit, man. Let's get cool with it. We would have known who they are still. We would have had that word around to represent the cultural movement. But
Mm.
because they immersed themselves primarily in politics and then lost, and then merged with the Republican Party during the Civil War,
Yeah.
it all washed out statist in the end. And the Loco-Foco word disappeared. Their movement disappeared and dissolved into the Republican Party or back into the Democratic Party. And we don't remember that they ever existed.
Yeah.
And yes, they had important impacts, namely affecting abolition, making that part of the Republican platform, and pushing the party to implement it. And a bunch of other things. Corporation law, general corporation law was their idea. Lots of stuff. But they have no historical movement to remember unless someone like myself determines to go and do the work of remembering it, digging them up and figuring it out. But that would just still be there if they hadn't all focused, put everything into the politics. And I think the politics probably would have worked itself out anyways because you changed people's minds in the process. And oftentimes your activities completely backfire.
Well, yeah, that is true. That is certainly
so, like, what are you going to, for the most part, you're talking about somebody else taking credit for your victories, killing and burying your own movement in that process of getting those few wins, and making all kinds of terrible mistakes that make things worse along the way. So I don't see a point to it.
I don't fully dispute, but I guess now I'm thinking of people who, again, it's an excuse, I would say, but to advocate for civil rights is to somehow be courting the state's endorsement of you. You're getting involved in it. To even acknowledge that civil rights kind of exist, you're letting the state sort of see you, but there's like a practical, moderate sort of protectionism that I think is involved in there. Like the really radical arguments against gay marriage, which were like, well, what happened to gay liberation? And liberation was great. I know we should bring it back, but I don't know. Like perhaps this necessitates some involvement in the state to protect yourself from the state, because I could argue examples where it was better perhaps than what would have happened if there was no movement at all.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I wouldn't say that everybody should make, the same choice that I would and not being politically involved, for example. But there are also all sorts of other ways to engage yourself in improving the world and in changing policy. You don't need to vote to do all sorts of other things. You don't need to be a member of a political movement or party or group of any sort, really, to be involved in protests, to be involved in petitioning your government of grievances, to be, changing people's minds, to be a tax cheat or whatever. Like, you can do all sorts of things. Oskar Schindler wasn't an important man because he was a member of the Nazi Party,
Well, for the contrast, shall we say, it makes it a little more interesting. Or my favorite, Raoul Wallenberg, who might show up in your textbook, but actually he won't show up. Perhaps the War Refugee Board, which helped fund his activities, will show up, because that was the state aspect of it. Raoul Wallenberg's own individual charisma and creativity in saving Hungarian Jews will not be in your textbook. Just the state part. So now I agree with you. You're right. All right.
Well, okay. Hold on real quick. Let me revise my claim.
Okay.
It's not good for libertarians to be politically engaged or in using political movements because it's not good for our philosophy.
Okay.
But there are plenty of other people like my wife, who needs to be protected from the state. And I don't want her to be at the tender mercies of the government. And so I can be supportive of political causes and movements that advocate for, better civil rights protections in this country. And that not be my libertarian organization doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can ally myself with others and not build the movement as a libertarian movement. We can cross-pollinate and work with others.
Cross-pollinate, that is a good word for what should be happening more. Yeah. The
reason we're not going to have a anarchist world tomorrow is because most people don't want one. So we have to work with that. And people still need protected from the government.
Like that poor armed libertarian guy in Texas who was in a Black Lives Matter protest with his girlfriend, who was, I believe, black and used a wheelchair, and he was with them, and he was open carrying, which may be pragmatically a bad idea, but he got shot by that fucking guy, like Uber driver or whatever, and then that guy got pardoned, and suddenly, solely because that guy was with Black Lives Matter, he was open carrying, he was, all of his rights were on display, but he was on their side, and again, the fraudulent libertarians immediately was like, oh, well, he should have thought of that before blah. So.
Yeah, that's painful.
Well, all right, let's do lightning round first. The first thing was actually going to be voting or not voting, but...
Oh, not. Absolutely not. I don't have the right to use power over anyone like that. Even if my goal is to protect them from power, I don't have the right to use it in any way.
I've got to say, voting has never made me feel good at all, so I am actually with you. Worst U.S. president ever?
Oh my God. Okay, like worst as a person or worst in office?
I'd say in office.
Damn. You're making me choose essentially in my head between Wilson and Bush. It's tough. Bush. His body count's higher.
Yeah.
We gotta find a metric, some way to create a presidential body count scale. And keep track of it all. That's the metric I would use, is who racked up the most bodies.
And I guess William Henry Harrison would be the greatest president of all time, which he was, because he died. And that was a good decision. Mises or Hayek?
Mises.
Okay. Spooner or Tucker?
Spooner's work is snappier.
Okay.
Because he didn't write nearly as much across his life as Tucker did. You could just endlessly read Benjamin Tucker's stuff. There's too much.
Oh, I didn't know there was a ton.
I mean, he wrote newspapers for years and years, like decades worth of Tucker material out there. But Spooner didn't actually, write that much in terms of volume. So his work is snappier and more fun.
Even though the right tries to claim him, but we shouldn't let them. Pizza or sushi?
Well, I'm going to have to go pizza because I can't eat a lot of sushi. I have food allergies to avocado and to saltwater fish.
That's tragic.
So it's very hard. And they only developed later in life. So I loved all of that stuff before. I would have gone with sushi before, but now it would limit me too much.
I would have gone with sushi, but I am a guilty pescatarian who should probably be a vegan. So I felt you on earlier for years. I was the same about meat. And now I don't feel superior, so don't worry. Star Trek or Star Wars?
Trek.
Excellent. Starting to turn around on that one more myself. The original one I just watched. It's so good.
Yeah, Trek is amazing.
Okay, well, bonus. Which Trek, if you're stuck and you can only have one show?
DS9 probably.
Nice.
DS9, but anything before the present era. Kelvin Timeline ruined it. Nothing's been good since.
See, thank you for having that opinion and not being a weird right-wing guy on the internet, because there are things that are bad and the diversity is good, but that's, yeah.
The writing is terrible and they don't know what to do with plots.
My husband and I are trying again to watch Discovery, which we gave up on a couple years ago, and it's, there's like, it's not as if everything about it is terrible, but there's so many speeches.
Yeah.
I
watched the first season of Picard, and I got 6 episodes through it and realized I don't know what is even happening in this show. I didn't remember any names. I didn't know what anybody was doing. Couldn't tell you anything about the 6 episodes I just watched. It's just god awful. Anyway, I could go on and on.
I've been warned against it, Picard, but DS9, original series, and TNG. Those are, to me, that's in that order. That is my current position.
DS9 is rewatchable.
So
although I think the peak episodes of the show are in TNG. And Voyager's very fun. Voyager's underrated. So is Enterprise.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Wow. Okay, no, I could distract by that too. If I was about to be stranded on a deserted island, what book would you lend to me? Would you like to lend me to pass the time? You can even lend me a nonfiction and a fiction if that helps at all.
Sure. To pass the time. How about I have you read Battlefield Earth for your fiction and Dianetics for your nonfiction.
No. I've never read Dianetics, but I bet nonfiction is pushing it in definition. Is my suspicion on that.
I got mailed this book the other day. This sounds interesting. It's called The Great Controversy. Will Two Former Rivals Unite? And it is a Seventh-day Adventist book from the 1800s about the dangers of the papacy dominating the U.S. government.
Prescient? Current.
So that sounds interesting.
Contemporary. Could not be more current. If you can think of 3 texts that people who want to get a sense of you should check out, things we discussed after this whole thing, what should people read?
Stuff from me or recommendations?
Things that were influential on you, or the world would be better if they read them.
Marcus Rediker's The Many-Headed Hydra, Rediker and Linebaugh, Peter Linebaugh. The Many-Headed Hydra, The Hidden History of the Revolutionary Atlantic. That's my favorite book ever of anything.
Okay.
Fiction or nonfiction. It's an incredible, incredible book full of important information and instruction, both on how to learn from history and how to learn from and with a Marxist, or 2 Marxists in this case. And it's just an absolutely tremendous book. Yeah, I did mention the Quinn Slobodian book as far as a recent thing. I think that's really, really, really important that people engage with that. Here's an odd example. This is called The People's Martyr by Eric Chaput. It's a history of a conflict in the U.S. that I'm sure most people have never, ever heard of, called the Dorr War in Rhode Island, DORR. And
think I have either.
It's the history of a rebellion in Rhode Island. The Loco-Focos were wrapped up in it and inspired a lot of the ideology behind it, which is why it came across my desk, and I have chapters in my dissertation on it. But it's the odd case of the 1842 rebellion in Rhode Island, trying to set up a different state government. So it's a very strange affair that almost nobody has heard of. And now I'll give you another book that I read in graduate school, which is ultimately what put me on the track to learn about the Boer War. A great book by Grimstead, David Grimstead, called American Mobbing. It's about the role of violence of all sorts, both like on the protest end and on the enforcement of laws, and the role of political violence in the U.S. for the Civil War. Really interesting book. I think that should cover it for the moment. And then of course, I'd recommend if you want like sampling of my work, probably the best place to do it is to search my materials on libertarianism.org from many years ago when I used to work there. I wrote my little heart out for 3 years for them.
I was going to ask about that. But first, I got to do the obligatory final thing, which is how would I buy a cappuccino in your political utopia?
How would you buy a cappuccino?
Or acquire one, shall we say?
I don't know. Any number of ways. My utopia is based on the idea that I don't know how most things should be done. And that's
absolutely a reasonable answer.
I don't know how most things should be done. That's why I don't believe in the state. I don't think the state is efficient at doing things because they don't know how anything should be done either. And they don't have any kind of automatic feedback mechanism to improve their behavior. So I'm an anarchist.
That is a perfect answer.
It's not my damn job to tell you how to get coffee.
Perfect answer. No notes. And let's go back to libertarianism.org. But where else can the people find you on the internet and your work? Like what platforms?
I'll write occasional book reviews for Reason magazines. You can find those there. My dissertation, while I don't currently have any plans to turn it into a book, because I just think it would take too much revising, and I don't think any large press would be really interested in it. There is actually a Loco-Focos press out there now, but it's not run by people who are really Loco-Focos, so I wouldn't want to publish there.
Okay.
But that's online. It's available for download. So if you Google up The Dupes of Hope Forever, that's the main title. You can download that. And the other main source would be I have used to make a lot of podcast appearances, both on the Cato Daily podcast. I had my own podcast, Liberty Chronicles, while I was at Cato. So if you're looking for a non-printed way to catch up with like material I've worked with, the Liberty Chronicles podcast is the best option. I also shortly did a podcast while here at IHS called Ideas in Progress, but COVID killed it.
Thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun, which is secretly all I care about. That's not true. But thank you.
Oh, it was great talking with you. Thank you so much. I'd be happy to be back and cover whatever else you might want to ask.
That would be great. All right.
All right.
You're listening to the Non-Serviam podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe over on our YouTube channel or on your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us across social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Mastodon. If you're extra interested in seeing this project continue, consider becoming a patron over at patreon.com. But if you can't contribute financially, we still like you a whole lot. And you can help us out just by liking and sharing this episode or any other one that catches your fancy. As always, shout out to our existing patrons. Your support helps us reach a larger audience and helps keep this project alive. Thanks so much.